Friends, hello to you. We are so happy that you're joining us through our online services, and it really it means a lot to us, and we take every week seriously to create a meaningful experience for you online. I'm Jay, I'm on the team here.
And I'm Angelica, and Jay is totally right. We are so intentional about creating this experience for you. I've seen leaders go to great lengths to train up a care team for you, to meet you where you're at in real time. So here is how to get connected today. Comment along with us. You will notice that there's an option to create a profile and chat with us on our live stream, or you can just post on Facebook or YouTube. So please take advantage of that. We love when people connect, ask questions, type out their favorite lyrics, and respond along with our message.
Yeah, that's big. And another great way to connect here is through prayer. Not pairs, through prayer. We understand the pressure that all of this whole thing is bringing on a lot of people, and we understand that you may need prayer. And so don't hesitate to hit the button on our live stream, and one of our amazing hosts on any of our platforms will create a private chat with you to pray with you over the interwebs. And we can't lay hands on you for prayer right now, but we're going to do our best to meet you right where you're at and absolutely pray for you in whatever you're going through. And hey, as I'm thinking through this, I'm putting some things together. Check this out. We reached 12,000, almost 12,000 people last weekend through online and social mediums. The number was like 11,800 and some, and that's incredible. It's incredible, not because the name of Discovery gets pushed out there, no, but because of the bigger church. You know why that's really incredible? It's simple. People need hope right now in our present circumstances, in their present circumstances. And guess what? What this whole thing is intended to do is bring the hope of Jesus that only really Jesus can bring into your living rooms and into people's lives. And so here's my question as I'm thinking about that. What would it look like if you were to, real fast before this thing gets really started, you share this link, or maybe you invite somebody or tag somebody on Facebook or online to come and join this experience too. I know a lot of people need hope right now.
Share it. And Jay makes me think through this. Whatever we are going through, you are welcome with us today. So whatever family disagreement or problem, homeschooling, job loss, or maybe you think we despise you because of your story if you did walk into church with us. Whatever it is that you think rolls you out, it doesn't. You are safe with us.
Absolutely.
Online or in the future, in person. You don't have to even believe what we believe to belong with us. We're just so glad that you're here with us today.
Yeah, that's well said, Angelica. And here's the deal. We're all just looking for a little bit of hope. So let's do that together today.
Yes.
Greg's going to be diving into some big topics and feelings of emptiness that a lot of us may be feeling ourselves. And so let's jump into the journey today together.
Yeah.
Hello, Discovery Church. Good to see you guys at home. Join us in some worship. Here we go. roaring with power and fighting our battles. And every knee will bow before Him. Our God is a Lamb, the Lamb that was slain for the sins of the world. His blood breaks the chains, and every knee will bow before the Lion and the Lamb. Every knee will bow before Him. There's nothing like your love, God. Oh, let's sing, who can stop? Then who can stop the Lord Almighty? Who can stop the Lord Almighty? Who can stop the Lord Almighty? Who can stop the Lord? We sing it over and over. Who can stop the Lord Almighty? And who can stop the Lord Almighty? Who can stop the Lord Almighty? Who can stop the Lord? Our God is alive, the Lion of Judah. He's roaring with power and fighting our battles. And every knee will bow before Him. Our God is a Lamb, the Lamb that was slain for the sins of the world. His blood breaks the chains, and every knee will bow before the Lion and the Lamb. Oh, every knee will bow before Him. We say, I hear the Savior say, thy strength indeed is small. Child of weakness, watching, pray. Find in me thy all in all. Jesus paid it all, and all to Him I owe. Sin had left a crimson stain. He washed it white as snow. Washed as white as snow. And now indeed I find that I am thine alone, can change a leopard's spot and melt with heart of stone. Jesus paid it all, and all to Him I owe. Sin had left a crimson stain. He washed it white as snow. You set us free.
Before the throne, I stand in Him complete. Jesus died, my soul is saved. My lips shall still repeat. Jesus paid it all to Him I owe. Sin had left a crimson stain. He washed it white as snow. Sin had left a crimson stain. He washed it white as snow.
Jesus paid it all to him I owe. And sin had left a crimson stain. He washed it white as snow.
All right, so hey, we just wanted to take a moment to check in and pause. I just want to ask you, how are you doing? Where are you at? And I just want to encourage you, pay attention to your surroundings, right? What's going on in your world as you're in your family rooms or in your home office, or maybe you're listening to this and you're driving for some reason, right? What are all the things going on in your world that may be distracting you? And we just want to turn down the noise for a second before we go into this last song before message. And I just want to ask, what's going on in your world? How's your life? Right? What's messing with you in the songs that we just sang, or in this song that we may sing? And I just want to encourage you, whatever worship would look like, because we have to do this a little bit different. Whatever worship looks like for you in the space that you're in, try to find a way to connect with the lyrics of this next song. So don't go anywhere. One more song before we jump back into message.
God of creation, there at the start, before the beginning of time. With no
So, hey there, good to have you with us or with us again online this weekend. You know, there are more churches out there this weekend streaming their service than there ever have been before in the history of the entire world. Now, I can't prove that, but I think that, and I could be wrong, but I'm not. And what that means, what that means for you is this: you got lots of options. That you have lots of options today. What you're going to do with your time. You have lots of great options and churches you could tune in with, and there's lots of great churches out there today. But somehow, some way, you today have landed here with us. And that means a lot to us. We don't take that for granted. We are honored and privileged to have you with us, even if grandma, mom, or your girlfriend is making you do this with us right now. We're still glad to have you with us. And because we've had so many new friends join us over the last several weeks, we want to let you know a little bit about this place, us, DCC. We are not people who used to be like you, who tolerate people like you, who put up with people like you, or fix people like you. We can't fix anyone. We promise you this. We are people just like you. People just like you. We've all made mistakes, some big, bad, ugly mistakes. We've all hurt people, even the people we love in our lives the most. We've all been hurt by people. We all have parts of our lives and stories that we wish we could change, erase, delete, or do over. So if any of that sounds like you, me too. If you've got a jacked up story, me too. Not us two. Us two is true, but me too. Greg, the pastor of this place, I've got a jacked up story too. We're just a tribe of broken people. We're people who are far from perfect, a tribe of people who are far from perfect, who are chasing after a better way to live, who believe that Jesus offers that, and we're honored that you have tuned in. We're pumped that you're tuning in to take this journey today online with us. So thanks for being with us this weekend, and we really hope that you tune in to do Easter with us next weekend too. So we're wrapping up a series today. We've been in for the last 6 weeks. I know it's a long series. It's called Inside Out. We're going to wrap it up today, and the question we've been dealing with in the series is this: when we pull back the curtain in our lives, what do we see? When we pull back the curtain in our lives and we take a hard and honest look, what do we see? Not what does the world see, not what's the image that we're presenting for the outside, for people around us to see, but what do we actually see? What is actually going on inside of us? Are you feeling a little bit of anger these days? A little bit of anxiety, a little bit of fear, a little bit of depression or hopelessness, a little bit of loneliness or isolation or hurt or sadness or sorrow or emptiness? I mean, I want to spend a little bit of time today thinking about and talking about that place in life where we all arrive, where we just kind of feel empty, just kind of feel numb. It's like, what's going on? Because I think in the last few weeks, a lot of us have landed there, haven't we? There have been so many things that used to bring us joy, laughter, happiness, life, that have been kind of taken away from us recently. And a lot of us have been left feeling empty, and that's a big deal. But as I've traveled through this ever-changing world over the last 3 or 4 weeks, you know what I've seen? I've seen something else that I think may be an even bigger problem for us. This may be even a bigger challenge for us. See, this changing world, this chaotic, this uncertain world that we live in, hasn't just spun up one emotion in us, has it? And if it has for you, you're lucky. Because for most of us, it's spun up a variety of emotions. Some or all of the emotions that we happen to be talking about in this series. And because of that, it's left most of us feeling a bit overwhelmed. Does that sound familiar to you? Do you feel a bit overwhelmed as you sit here today? Me too. You're not alone. I'm feeling that too. And see, here's the thing. I don't think that we can wrap up and shut down this series without talking about that. So regardless of what you're feeling as you're watching today, whether you're feeling empty, you're feeling overwhelmed, you're feeling sad, you're feeling hurt, you're feeling anxious, whatever it might be, what we've been pointing you to in this series, and what we want to say to you today is the same. It's the end of that video. You are not alone. We're all together in this, and together we're going to get through this. There is hope. I promise you it's true. There's hope for all of us. You know, I like to read a lot of books at the same time. It's kind of my thing. And so I've got a Kindle, and I'll have books. I get bored with one, I switch to another. So recently what I've done is I've gone back to some of the books I've already read. I take notes when I read books, and I'm just rereading my notes from books. I read a lot of history, a lot of biographies. Books that I've read about Abraham Lincoln, George Washington, Martin Luther King Jr., Winston Churchill, FDR, Teddy Roosevelt, people like that. So I've gone back and read my notes from these books I've read on these leaders, all leaders who had to lead through these incredibly challenging, difficult, terrible times. As I was reading through a book I read, the notes from a book I read on Churchill, I got so inspired. I went to Redbox and I got the movie Darkest Hour. And I watched it. Have you seen the movie? I mean, it's a really, really good movie. Historically accurate, right? I mean, it's World War II. Germany's rolling across Europe. They're about to roll all the way through France. England will be next. It looks like an invasion of England is imminent. And Winston Churchill becomes Prime Minister of England. And he gives his famous speech, blood, sweat, and tears speech to Parliament. And as he gets to the end of his speech, he's talking to Parliament, and in the response is, he does this. He's talking about victory. And you know, if you haven't read that speech, you need to go read it. Google it. It's just a couple pages long, especially the end. It's really, really good stuff. He does this for victory. V for victory. Right? But what he doesn't know when he does that, now when we see this, you and I see this, we typically think peace. Right? We think peace. Or you want to go V for victory? Okay, we could do that too. Maybe we could start a revolution, right? I don't think it would be too hurtful for us to do this, right? Peace. Peace on you, regardless of what you're going through in your life right now. I want peace over you. Victory. We're going to get through this together. That's all good stuff. But he turned it this way, and he didn't find out until the very next day from his assistant that when you turn it around this way, it doesn't mean victory. You know what it means? Up yours. Yikes. Okay, so if we're going to start a revolution, let's just make sure that we're turning it the right way. Listen, the bad news is, just like when Winston Churchill became Prime Minister of England, these challenges that we're facing today, the bad news is they're not going to go away tomorrow. The good news is, just like the people of England in World War II, together, we will get through this. And the best news is this: God has a lot of help that he wants to offer to us during these times. God has a lot to say to you and me about how do we deal with this wild and violent range of emotions that we're likely to experience until we get through this, until we overcome this. So let's jump back into this, and let's wrap this up today by talking just a little bit more about that. We're going to be in Philippians chapter 4 today. Don't expect you to have a Bible. If you do, you can open it to Philippians 4. If you don't, everything I read is going to be right there for you at the bottom of the screen. So Philippians chapter 4, beginning with verse 4. Here we go. Paul writes this, the Apostle Paul writes this: "Rejoice in the Lord always. I say it again, rejoice. Let your gentleness be evident to all. The Lord is near. Do not be anxious about anything, but in every situation, by prayer and petition with thanksgiving, present your request to God, and the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts and minds in Christ Jesus." All right, let's stop there and let's unpack this just a little bit. So we're told to rejoice. What's that mean? It means to feel or show joy to the world around us. Okay, are we doing that? Then he says, "Let your gentleness be evident to all." And what does that mean when he says, "Let your gentleness be evident to all"? Well, the Greek word here for gentleness is epiakes. And you may be like, wait a minute, whoa. That doesn't sound like Greek. That's because it's Kentucky Greek, all right? I'm a Kentucky boy. I didn't say a Kentucky fan, by the way, a Kentucky boy. I'm a Louisville fan, my alma mater, go Cards. But that's Kentucky Greek. That's why it sounds jacked up. But here's what it means. Epiakes, here's what it means, okay? It means kindness. It means tolerance. It means patience. It means calm. I like to put it this way: calmness in the midst of the storm. So let that be evident about you to everyone around you in this time of crisis that we're all going through right now. Is that what's most evident about us? That's the question. Then he says, and don't be anxious about anything. Now, if you weren't here, or you go back, Sherry Snyder, one of our good friends, she's brilliant. She preached on this the second week of the series, anxiousness. If you're anxious or worried, go back and watch that sermon. But here's the thing, listen, in the Greek, the word for anxious here it's not necessarily best interpreted as worry. It's really more interpreted as falling apart or coming apart or being pulled in different directions, being torn apart or ripped apart, which when you think about it, I think overwhelmed kind of fits here. So Paul says, don't be anxious, don't be overwhelmed, but do this. Do what? Are you ready? Drum roll. You were expecting this. Pray. And you're like, that's exactly what I thought a preacher would say to me today. That you're going to tell me I need to pray more. I need to pray better. I need to learn to say the right words, all that stuff. Hey, hold on. Just a second, okay? Hang with me for just a second. Let's talk about this. Here's the first question I have for us today. All right? In the midst of all we're going through, am I paying attention? What am I doing? What am I doing with what I'm feeling? Do you recognize what it is that you're feeling? What emotion are you feeling? That's important, but as I said last week, awareness is not healing, so that's not enough. So what am I doing with what I'm feeling? Are you feeling empty? Let's talk about this emptiness thing for a second. Let me just ask you a question. Paul says the answer is to pray. So does prayer ever feel empty to you? Does it? Do you ever feel so overwhelmed in life that you don't even know what to pray? You don't know what to say. You haven't been in church. You haven't been taught the right things. You hear other people, oh, I can't do that. You ever felt that? I think sometimes we get so overwhelmed by what's going on in the world around us. It's like there's so much to pray about. Where do I even begin? How do I start? What do I say? I'll tell you something. I've been struggling with that a little bit too these days. Trying my best to pray, but there's just so much that we could be praying for. I don't think that's uncommon for prayer to feel a little bit empty to us. Or we pray and nothing seems to change or happen in our life. So what's Paul suggesting to us here? He's saying pray. And what's at stake here? That's the question. What's available to us? What's he say? He says a peace. He says a peace that blows our mind in the midst of an overwhelming storm. I think we need to pay attention to this, don't we? Now listen, if you're out there and you struggle with this prayer thing, I get it. I grew up in church, but I get it. I understand it. In fact, Jesus, his disciples, the guys that did life with him very closely for 3 years, they finally asked Jesus, said, Jesus, teach us how to pray. And Jesus does that. So there's lots of things we could look to when we're trying to learn to pray. We could look to what Jesus teaches his disciples. That would be great. There's other scriptures. We could look to some of the Psalms, some great prayers in the Psalms. We could look to our friends at Ransomed Heart. Our friends at ransomheart.com, go there. Click the prayer button at the top. They've got great prayers. You can hear the audio. You can read the transcript. Somebody on the chat needs to, hey, put that up there, ransomheart.com, so you can go there after we're finished. But I want to talk about something maybe that will help us today. I want to ask you to do something kind of different with me today. Here's what it is. I want to ask you right now, I want to ask you to close your eyes. I know, feels a little weird maybe. But it's just your wife and your dog, maybe your kids that's watching, so it's going to be okay. All right, so we're going to close our eyes. Maybe we do this too before you close your eyes, because you're supposed to do that. That's what all good Christians do when they pray, right? You do this. So just got your eyes closed, and I'm just going to pray a little bit. I want us to try together today to listen to this and try to learn how to pray. So you ready? Are your eyes closed? Don't cheat. Don't peek. Here we go. Dear Lord, baby Jesus, or as our brothers to the south call you, Jesus, thank you so much for this bountiful harvest of Domino's, KFC, and the always delicious Taco Bell. Now open your eyes up. Does that sound familiar to you? Does it? Does it? Let me show you what that's from, okay? Here's an image we're going to put up here for you. It's from the movie Talladega Nights. It's the prayer from the movie Talladega Nights. Now listen, I'd love to show you the clip. I would rather show you the clip than just pray it here with you because it's hilarious. In fact, you should go watch the movie with your family. What else are you going to do? Watch the movie. Normally, if you came to DCC when we can meet, we use lots of movie clips around here. Can't do that now because they'll mute us on the stream, and that wouldn't be good. So we can't do that. So here it is. This is a prayer from Talladega Nights, okay? So don't check out on me. Let's continue the prayer. I just want to take time to say thank you for my family, my two beautiful, handsome, striking sons, Walker and Texas Ranger, or TR as we like to call him. And of course, for my red-hot smoking wife, Carly, who's a stone-cold fox, who if you would rate her on 100 would easily be a 94. I also want to thank you for my best friend and teammate, Cal Naughton Jr., who's got my back no matter what. Dear Lord, baby Jesus, we'd also like to thank you for my wife's father, Chip. And we hope that you can use your baby Jesus powers to heal him in his horrible leg. It smells terrible, and the dogs are always bothering with it. Now, you may think that is totally and completely ridiculous. Hang with me just a second, okay? You may be surprised by this. There's some good theology in that prayer. Did you catch it? Because before he ever gets to the petition, right? Before he presents his request to God, what's his request? Help father-in-law Chip's horrible, stinky leg. What's he do? He says, God, thank you for Domino's, for KFC and Taco Bell. Thank you for my kids and my family. Thank you for my beautiful wife. Thank you for my friend Cal. Thank you for my father-in-law Chip. With thanksgiving, present your requests to God. There is something that we need to see here. As ridiculous as it may seem, there's something that we need to see here. Because I don't know about you, but when the world seems like it's closing in on me, when it feels like my head is in a vice, when it feels like things are going from bad to worse and I can't take anymore, you know what happens to me? All the things that I have to be thankful for in my life that God has done and he's continuing to do for me get lost. They get so easily lost. I'm not thinking about that. All I can really think about is what? The problem, the challenge, the monster, the mountain that's right in front of me. Now, am I suggesting to us that we get our prayer advice from Ricky Bobby? Of course not. What am I suggesting? I'm suggesting we listen to what Paul's saying here. So let's go back to Paul. Let's get back to him. What does he say here? What does he say we should do with what we're feeling? He says, don't be anxious about it. He says, don't be overwhelmed by it. Talk to God about it. Be real with him. Be raw with him. Tell him exactly what's going on inside of you. Guess what? You don't need to hold back. God can take it. God can take it. When we do that, what's the promise here? The problem, it's not that the problem is solved. It's what? It's that a peace, God's peace, in the midst of all that we're going through, that makes absolutely no sense at all, will begin to what? It will begin to come over us. See, I don't know about you, but I could use a little bit more of that in my life these days. How about you? Well, let's keep rolling. Verse 8, Paul keeps going. He says, finally, brothers and sisters, whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is admirable, if anything is excellent or praiseworthy, think about such things. And whatever you have learned or received or heard from me or seen in me, put it into practice, and the God of peace will be with you. So we have to pay attention to what we're feeling, and we have to pay attention to what we're doing with what we're feeling. But Paul says this. He says, don't stop there. What does he say? He says, think about what's true, which means what? Not fake news. Sorry, I just had to say that. Not fake news, right? Think about what's true. That's what Paul's saying to us here. I was reading this past week from some experts, and they were talking about how these big feelings that we have in our lives, these raw emotions that come to the surface, how they're connected to what we're thinking. You know what they said? They said 92% of the thoughts that we're having that are causing all this emotional turmoil in our lives are things that never actually happen. They are imaginary scenarios that never really play out at all in our lives, which means that it's just 8%. Only 8% of what it is that we're thinking about, that we get so worked up about, are actually legitimate concerns. So knowing that and understanding what Paul's trying to tell us here, here's the second question I want to ask. What are we doing with what we're thinking? What are we doing with our thinking, those thoughts that are coming through our mind? Now, why is that question so important? Here it is. Because so much of what I'm feeling is directly connected to what I'm thinking about. And it's really impossible to disconnect the two. You know what I've been thinking about lately? A lot. 2 words. What if? What if? What if this thing continues for months? This virus, lockdown, stay-at-home thing that we're going through. What if I get the virus? What if someone close to me gets the virus? What if we have to keep doing church online for months and months and months? What if we get to Christmas and we're still doing church online? What if? I got thousands of what ifs. How about you? Now see, here's our problem. It's what if that causes us to feel what? Sad, scared, overwhelmed, lonely, hopeless, all the things that we're working on what? Trying to learn to overcome together in this series. That's where it leads us. And so as we run through the list of Paul tells us here, he says, here's the things that you should be thinking about. What does he say? He says, whatever's true, noble, right, pure, lovely, whatever is admirable, excellent, and praiseworthy. If you think about it, he's telling us, think about things that are consistent with what? The heart and character of God himself. A father who unconditionally loves me, who will never leave me or forsake me, and who will never, ever stop pursuing me. So here's the question. Do your thoughts these days tend to give you hope, or do they more tend to leave you hopeless? Which is true for you? See, regardless of what you're thinking, regardless of what you're feeling, here's what I think we need to do. We need to pause here for just a few minutes. And we need to spend a little bit of time reminding ourselves of and thinking about something different. I want to challenge us to think differently here. So what are you thinking about? And what are you doing with what you're thinking? Is there another alternative here? If you want to sing, you can sing. If not, just soak in these words. Could there be a better alternative for us here? Listen to these words.
I've been held by the Savior. I felt fire from above, and I've been down to the river, and I ate the same prodigal. Sing with this. All my hope is in Jesus. Thank God my yesterday's gone. All my sins are forgiven, and I've been washed by the blood. And I'm no stranger to the prison, and I've worn shackles and chains, but I've been freed and forgiven, and I'm not going back. No, I'll never be the same. That's why I sing, all my hope is in Jesus. Thank God my yesterday's gone. All my sins are forgiven, and I've been washed by the blood. There's a kind of thing that just breaks a man, brings it down to his knees. And I've been broken more than a time or two, but he picked me up and he showed me what it means to be a man. My hope is in Jesus. Thank God my yesterday's gone. Sing. All my sins are forgiven, and I've been washed by the blood. Sing this out. All my hope is in Jesus. Thank God my yesterday's gone. All my sins are forgiven, and I've been washed by the blood. And I've been washed by the I've been washed by
So if you're wondering why there's people there when we did that song, we actually did that a few weeks back before we had to quarantine or lock down, but it's so good. That message is so good. I wanted to bring it back because I think that's what we should be thinking about today. We should be leaning in. All of my hope is in Jesus. So Paul says, he says, lean into, here's the trick. I want you to lean into what I've told you, what I've taught you, what I've shown you. Now here, that creates a problem for us. Why? Because Paul wrote about half the New Testament. So you're like, which part, Paul? It would help me if you kind of narrowed things down just a bit. So I want to do that for us. I want to zoom in on just two things. 2 Corinthians chapter 11 and chapter 10. 2 Corinthians chapter 11, we're not going to read it. I'm going to summarize it in just a bit, but here's what's going on. Paul gives us a laundry list of all the hard things that he's been through as he's tried his best to follow Jesus. These aren't things that happened to him before he became a follower of Jesus. This is after he decided to follow Jesus. And here it is. Let me summarize it like this. He says, on multiple occasions, not once, but multiple times, I've been beaten with rods, pelted with stones, shipwrecked. I spent a night and day in the open sea, gone without sleep, food, water, and have been cold and naked. Now I have two questions coming out of that. And you need to read chapter 11 because there's a lot more to it than just that. Were there reasons As Paul's going through all of that, in light of all that Paul is going through, were there times and reasons for Paul's thinking to get totally and completely whacked in light of what he was going through? Yes, you better believe it. That's the first question. Second question is this: can Paul relate to us? Can Paul relate to you and me in the midst of all that we're going through today? In light of isolation and stay-at-home orders and lockdowns and loneliness and mandatory homeschooling and coronavirus and loss of jobs and loss of incomes, in the midst of inability to pay our bills, in the midst of all we're going through, can Paul relate to us? Of course he can. Yes, you better believe it. And what Paul says to us here, he says, in the midst of all of that, God's peace is available. But if you want God's peace, lean in to what I've taught you, told you, and shown you. It's like, come on, Paul, help us out here. I think specifically, one of the things we could look at that he's trying to help us with here is this. One chapter before, he goes through this laundry list of all the hard things he's been through in his life, and he's been through hell. He gives us a little bit of insight in what allowed him, how he had the ability to get through it. And I think this is really helpful for you and me. So now we're 2 Corinthians chapter 10. We're going to back up a chapter. Listen to this, verse 3. For though we live in a world, we do not wage war as the world does. The weapons we fight with are not the weapons of the world. On the contrary, they have divine power to demolish strongholds. And we demolish arguments and every pretension that sets itself up against the knowledge of God, who God is. And we take captive every thought to make it obedient to Christ. How are we doing with that piece? And we take captive every single thought to make it obedient to Christ. How are we really doing with that? This past Tuesday, God's blessed us with some good weather, except for Friday. God's blessed us with some good weather in the past week. Tuesday was a beautiful day. I came in for a few meetings, essential meetings that I had to have. And then I went home. I worked from my office at home the rest of the day. And so I come out of my office in the late afternoon. I'm cutting through the house. I'm going to go out on the deck to start the grill. And I'm thinking about we're going to build a little fire in the fire pit that night. And Stace and I are going to sit out by the fire. So as I'm going through the family room to get to the sliding glass doors that go on onto the deck, the evening news, the national evening news was on, and the anchor said something that caught my attention. So I stopped and I looked at the TV. And you know what? It wasn't necessarily what he said. It was how he said it. It was his tone. It was so gloomy. So much gloom and doom and darkness and despair and hopelessness just in the tone that he was using that I stopped in my track and I looked over and I could feel it. Just listening to him talk, I could feel it rising up inside of me. It was something, my thinking started to get whacked. Right there in the moment, it just started to happen to me. So I look at Stace, she's over in the kitchen. I said, Stace, can I turn that off, please? Can we just turn on some worship music? Now listen, don't make me holier than I am. And I'm a realist. It's not that I'm not willing to face the reality, the harsh reality of the world that we're living in today and the challenges that we face. I'm willing. You know what it is? I'm trying to put into practice what Paul's talking about here. I'm trying to learn the best I can to take my thoughts captive, to deal with and dismiss the ones that don't line up with God, and to get back to who God is in the midst of all this stuff. That's what I'm trying to do. And so we turned off the news, and we turned on the music, and we just listened to worship music for the rest of the night. See, listen, here's the thing. I don't know that there's ever been a time in my lifetime anyway where it's been more important for you and for me to learn to take our thoughts captive. To take that thought captive and say, wait a minute, does this line up with who God is? Or do I need to dismiss this? I don't think that's ever been more important for us than it is for us right now. In this unsettled world that we find ourselves living in, that we can't control. That's a part of our problem, isn't it? We can't control it. You know what I'm finding is really helping me? In the midst of this world that just seems to be so far beyond my control that I can't control, it helps me to get back to the one who is in control. And what I'm talking about is that song that we sang. Right before I came up here, the song that we sang, So Will I. That this God simply spoke and 100 billion galaxies were formed. Unbelievable. And that God knows me. He knows my name. He knows the number of hairs on my head. And he unconditionally loves me despite how my story reads, as jacked up as my story is. He unconditionally loves me. He'll never leave me. He'll never forsake me. And he'll never stop pursuing me. My question is, how much time are we actually spending thinking about that? How much time are we spending in the challenges of this world getting back to that? So the question is, what are we thinking? And more importantly, what are we doing with what we're thinking? And as we learn to take these thoughts captive And to measure that thought against what God says is true, what's the promise here? It's not that all of our problems are solved or that the challenges are gone. What is it? That the peace of God will be with us. There it is again. I don't know about you, but I could use some more of that in my life these days. Well, let's finish this up. Let's head down the back stretch. Verse 10. Verse 10. Paul keeps writing. He says, I rejoice greatly in the Lord. At last you renewed your concern for me. Indeed, you were concerned, but you had no opportunity to show it. Now, I'm not saying this because I'm in need, for I've learned to be content, whatever the circumstances. I know what it is to be in need, and I know what it is to have plenty. I have learned the secret of being content in any and every situation, whether well-fed or hungry, whether living in plenty or want. I can do all of this. He says, I can do all of this, every single bit of this, through him who gives me strength, through Christ who gives me strength. Now, it's obvious when we read this last section. What's he start with? I rejoice greatly in the Lord that you renewed your concern for me. It's obvious that Paul, the people he's writing to, that Paul is very thankful for their encouragement, their love, and their support. And we see this throughout all the letters he writes to various churches in the New Testament. He loves his people. And so that's obvious for us here too. So it's important that we see that, I think. I think it's important that we see that we recognize in this time of social distancing, with all these requirements that are on us to stay away from each other, I think it's important for us to recognize that we still need each other. We still need each other. I mean, Paul's talked about the power of prayer. Now he's talking about the power of people. The power of having a few of the right people in our lives that help us in the midst of these overwhelming storms. But don't miss this. Paul's hope and his strength is not coming from the people around him. Where does he say it comes from? What is it that gives Paul the strength to get through coronavirus-like times in his life and story? That's the question. As we think about the answer to that question, there's another question I want us to return to. It's a question that we asked earlier in this series. It's a very, very important. Why are we going back to it? Because it's that important. Before we shut this thing down, we need to get back to this. And here's the question. Whose power and strength am I really leaning into? Whose power and whose strength am I most leaning into today? That's the question. And I don't want to mislead here. Listen, I want to make sure we're clear. Jesus is our primary source of strength. He is. But in times like what we're going through now today, in the world around us today, in these times of uncertainty, the scary world that we find ourselves living in today, listen, you still need me and I still need you. You can be a source of hope for me and I can be a source of hope for you. William McRaven is a retired Navy SEAL admiral. It's pretty cool. He used to be the commander of Special Ops Commands for the entire U.S. from 2011 to 2014. I've read a couple of his books. Make Your Bed came out last week. New York Times bestseller. Great book. I'm reading a book called Sea Stories right now that he wrote. Another great book. A friend of mine, though, a good buddy of mine here, John, he's an elder in our church. He sent me a quote from Admiral McRaven last week, and it made me start thinking about a commencement address that he gave at the University of Texas, which is his alma mater, Hook 'em Horns, about 6 years ago, back in 2014. And he spent a few minutes in that commencement address talking about something that I think would be really helpful for all of us to hear today. So let's watch this.
The 9th week of training is referred to as Hell Week. It is 6 days of no sleep, constant physical and mental harassment, and one special day at the Mud Flats. The Mud Flats are an area between San Diego and Tijuana where the water runs off and creates the Tijuana Sloughs, a swampy patch of terrain where the mud will engulf you. It is on Wednesday of Hell Week that you paddle down to the mud flats and spend the next 15 hours trying to survive this freezing cold, the howling wind, and the incessant pressure to quit from the instructors. As the sun began to set that Wednesday evening, my training class, having committed some egregious infraction of the rules, was ordered into the mud. The mud consumed each man till there was nothing visible but our heads. The instructors told us we could leave the mud if only 5 men would quit. Only 5 men, just 5 men, and we could get out of the oppressive cold. Looking around the mud flat, it was apparent that some students were about to give up. It was still over 8 hours till the sun came up. 8 more hours of bone-chilling cold. The chattering teeth and the shivering moans of the trainees were so loud, it was hard to hear anything. And then one voice began to echo through the night. One voice raised in song. The song was terribly out of tune, but sung with great enthusiasm. One voice became two, and two became three, and before long, everyone in the class was singing. The instructors threatened us with more time in the mud if we kept up the singing, but the singing persisted. And somehow the mud seemed a little warmer, and the wind a little tamer, and the dawn not so far away. If I have learned anything in my time traveling the world, it is the power of hope. The power of one person, a Washington, a Lincoln, King, Mandela, and even a young girl from Pakistan, Malala. One person can change the world by giving people hope. So if you want to change the world, start singing when you're up to your neck in mud.
So if you want to change the world, start singing when you're up to your neck in mud. That was 6 years ago, and very recently, in the last month or so, Admiral McRaven has written something else that dials that in, what he said 6 years ago, into the mud that we all find ourselves in today. And I just want to read it to you. He says, today, the coronavirus has thrown all of us into the mud. And we're cold, wet, miserable, and the dawn seems a long way off. But while we should not be cavalier about the dangers of the pandemic, neither should we feel hopeless or paralyzed with fear. Hope abounds. As we always have in times of crisis, Americans are rallying together, caring for one another, showing the compassion and concern that have always characterized this nation of good people. Nothing in our immediate future will be easy. The number of cases will rise, the losses will increase, the markets will stumble. But make no mistake about it, we will prevail. Because the only thing more contagious than a virus is hope. We're all up to our necks in the mud. It's time to start singing. You know, he's right. There are people all around you and all around me today that they just need to hear us sing. They need to hear you, and they need to hear me sing. I don't want you to miss the opportunity. I don't want you to miss the opportunity that's in front of you to provide hope to other people during this pandemic, but I also don't want you to misunderstand the limitations of turning exclusively to people around you to find hope. It'll never work. God's promise to us here is His peace will guard us and will guide us through it, whatever it is. That He will give us the strength to get through this. And so back to the questions. Whose strength am I really most leaning into today? The promise is not peace when things are going well for us. That's easy. The promise is peace regardless of what it is that we happen to find ourselves going through. And I don't know about you, but I could use some more of that in my life. I want some more of that in my life. So regardless of what you're facing today, whether it's anger or anxiety, worry, depression, hopelessness, sorrow, sadness, hurt, pain, emptiness, whatever it might be, some combination of some or all of those things, whatever it might be, we have to end this series by leaning hard into this. We can do all things. You and I, we can do all things through Jesus who gives us strength. We can do all things through Jesus that gives us strength. We got to learn. We got to learn in these kind of times. We got to lean back into that. So do we need each other? Yes, we need each other. And we need to lean into each other to the extent that we're allowed to or the extent that we can. But more than that, you know what we need? We need to lean hard into Jesus. We need to call out and call upon Jesus. There is no better hiding place than Jesus. There's no better place for us to run to. Our hope is safe in Him. And He promises He will never forsake us. It's He alone that is strong enough to save us. So please, don't end this. Don't click out. Don't end until the service is over. We need to spend these last few minutes together leaning hard, leaning really hard into this. Let me pray for us. Jesus, we need You. You are our rock, our refuge, our ever-present help in times of trouble, our source of strength. When our strength is gone, when it's tapped out, when we feel so empty inside, when we're overwhelmed with all that life throws at us, there's a light that shines in the darkness. And so we call upon You. We call upon you to be our strength when we feel like tapping out. Jesus, we call upon you. Would you come and do for us and in us what it is that only you can do? All of our hope is in you. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
We need no other hiding place. Our hope is safe within your name. This we know, this we know. You promise never to forsake. What you began, you will sustain. This we know, yes, this we know. I will call upon the Lord, for He alone is strong enough to save. Rise, your shackles are no more, for Jesus Christ has broken every chain. And the earth announce the fullness of your word. This we know, yes, this we know. And every enemy will flee as we declare your victory. This we know. This we know. I will call upon the Lord, for He alone is strong enough to save. Rise, your shackles are no more, for Jesus Christ has broken every chain. He's broken every chain. 'Cause Jesus' name will break every stronghold. Freedom is ours when we call His name. Jesus' name above every other. All hail the power of Jesus' name. Jesus' name will break every stronghold. Freedom is ours when we call His name. Jesus' name above every other. All hail the power of Jesus' name. All hail the power of Jesus' name. So I will call upon the Lord, for He alone is strong enough to save. Rise, your shackles are no more, for Jesus Christ has broken every chain. I will call upon the Lord, for He alone is strong enough to save. Rise, your shackles are no more, for Jesus Christ has broken
Man, what a great service. That's a message we all need to hear.
Yeah, absolutely. I know I needed to hear it.
We hope it was an encouragement to you. Freedom is ours when we call on His name. So
yeah.
here's a couple things we need you to know before you click out of here today.
Yeah. Well, the biggest, most important thing that we want you to know about is Easter is coming. And Easter is going to be huge and bigger than ever before.
Yes.
And I feel like we say that every week when it's going to be in the building. But guess what? The team has done so many things to create and imagine a journey that will be absolutely huge for you. So there's going to be tons of life, tons of energy, tons of joy. You do not want to miss Easter this year. So invite a friend, bring some people with you. Easter, man. And I just remembered one thing or a couple things that they're doing. It's going to blow your mind. Incredible things that they're doing to change up the whole way that we're presenting Easter to you this year. Hey, another thing that we really want you to know is we're just cognizant that a lot of people need help right now. And we want to be a place where you can get help and you can also give help. So email us, help@livetorescue.com. And we would also love to hear stories of how you're interacting with the message or what's going on in your world at this time and how this whole thing is changing you. And so you can email those stories also to help@livetorescue.com. And we'd love to collect all that stuff.
Yeah, send it all.
Yeah, send it all. And again, we want to reiterate this prayer. Hey, we know that a lot of us are going through really difficult times. So you can email us if you didn't get to click on the prayer button. You can email us prayer@livetorescue.com. We'd love to pray with and for you.
Yeah, and we see you, families. We have heard so many stories about parents working and parenting and teaching through this season. We are for you. Our families team, kids team, and students have basically been working overtime creating amazing content for you.
Yeah.
And so you can find all that at our Live to Rescue website. Just hover over to family and you can choose either kids or students. And so there's a ton for you to interact with. Also, our live online prayer gathering is happening this Thursday at 3 p.m. on Facebook and Instagram. So tune in, interact with us.
Yeah.
We'd love to pray for you. All right, well, that's it for this week. We're so glad that you are here. Invite a friend. We are so pumped for you to come back next week. And like we've said, this will be an Easter you do not want to miss. Go big or go home.
Yeah, go big or go home. Not like go home because you're already home, but like we're going to go big and bring it into your home. And we are so excited for that. So,
Absolutely.
yeah, we'll see you next week.
Bye.